The sociocultural theory of cognitive development from the theorist Lev Vygotsky, presented by Brittany Pitt. The sociocultural theory of cognitive development suggests that human learning is largely a social process and that our cognitive functions are formed based on our interactions with those around us who are more skilled. According to this theory, our psychological growth is guided by mentors in our lives, our parents and teachers, and our interactions within our social groups, like participating in cultural events. This theory was put forth by Lev Vygotsky, a Russian psychologist who lived in present-day Belarus from 1896 to 1934. He was known as the Mozart of psychology because, just as the famous composer created many different works, Vygotsky came up with several different theories in a short span of time. Unfortunately, Vygotsky's life was cut short when he died at the age of 38 from tuberculosis, leaving much of his work incomplete. He was alive at the same time as another famous theorist, Jean Piaget, and they both contributed great works and contributions to the field of child development and cognitive psychology. Vygotsky's theories were developed during a time when Marxism had just replaced dictatorship in Russia. A shift in thinking occurred. The individual was now expected to sacrifice personal gain for the greater good of the nation. Success of an individual was considered success for the culture. This explains the perspective behind the sociocultural theory. This is the environment that shaped it. Much of Vygotsky's work contradicts Jean Piaget's work, who maintained that culture did not influence cognitive development in a significant way. In the 1950s, shortly after Vygotsky's death, another shift in thinking happened, this time about the nature of knowledge. From behaviorism, a teacher-centered approach that saw learners as passive, to constructivism. Educators began to view knowledge as something that is constructed by the individual. They must construct their own meaning by making sense of their experience. The overall purpose of education is to enable learners to create new knowledge, building upon prior knowledge and experiences. The constructivist paradigm views learning as a process of active discovery, where the teacher's role is to provide the necessary resources and to guide the learner. The teacher must account for the student's current knowledge level, current experiences, and cultural background. Lev Vygotsky was a constructivist. He was interested in knowledge acquisition as a cumulative event. New experiences will be incorporated into existing knowledge. His theory differs from Piaget in that Vygotsky stressed the role culture has on development. This theory states that adult interaction is important in fostering a child's cognitive development. Adults engage children in meaningful activities that are challenging. This interaction affects the development of higher order mental functions, like formal reasoning. Children are born with elementary abilities such as memory and perception, but the higher mental functions cannot be developed without an adult or more knowledgeable other. Adults show children the meaning their culture attaches to objects, events, and experiences. Adults convey to children the way their culture interprets and responds to the world. Children are provided with the what to think, the knowledge, and the how to think, the processes and thinking tools. Finally, Vygotsky's theory states that language has two functions. He was the first to suggest this. He suggested that inner speech is what we use for mental reasoning and external speech is what we use to converse with others. The operations occur separately until thought and language merge and social language is internalized. Vygotsky and Piaget were both constructivists. However, they differed in a few ways. Most importantly, Vygotsky believed that culture and social context affect cognitive development. The environment the child grows up in will influence how they think and what they think about. Piaget maintained that cognitive development is universal across cultures and follows a set of universal stages. Next, Vygotsky believed that development stems from social interactions within the student's zone of proximal development. Children co-construct knowledge with a more knowledgeable partner. Piaget maintained that development stems from independent exploration, in which children construct knowledge on their own. Vygotsky placed greater influence on language than Piaget. For Vygotsky, thought and language are separate systems at the start of life, merging around 3 years old to produce verbal thought or inner speech. Piaget argued that language depends upon thought for its development. Finally, when it comes to cognitive development, Vygotsky argues that adult interaction is an important source of development. Piaget argues that peers of the same age are an important source of development. The cultural component of Vygotsky's theory states that culture determines the type of strategies we develop when we learn. For example, strategies for memory differ across culture. In Western culture, we learn note-taking to aid our memory. In other pre-literate societies, strategies such as tying knots in string or carrying pebbles are learned to aid in memory. The key features of this theory are the importance of language, the more knowledgeable other, or MKO, and the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, and scaffolding. Vygotsky believed that language develops from social interactions. It develops for communication purposes. He states that language plays two critical roles in cognitive development. One, it is the means by which adults transmit information to children. And two, language itself becomes a very powerful tool of intellectual adaptation. This theory also states that there are three forms of language: social speech, private speech, and silent inner speech. Social speech is the external communication we use to talk to others, starting around the age of 2. Private speech is directed to the self and serves an intellectual function. It begins around the age of 3. Vygotsky was the first to document the importance of private speech. He considered it the transition point between social and inner speech, when language and thought unite to create verbal thinking. Through private speech, children can collaborate with themselves the same way they would collaborate with an adult. It is a means for children to plan activities and strategies that aid in their own development. Private speech is the use of language for self-regulation of behavior. Private speech is a product of the individual's social environment. This hypothesis has been supported by many studies showing high positive correlation between rates of social interaction and private speech in children. Children raised in cognitively and linguistically stimulating environments, typically higher SES homes, start using and internalizing speech faster than children raised in environments characterized by low verbal and social exchanges. In fact, the latter tend to exhibit delays in private speech development. Silent inner speech typically develops around age 7. At this point, private speech diminishes in audibility, transforming into silent inner speech. Speech now takes on a self-regulating function. Vygotsky states in his book, Thought and Language, that inner speech is not the interior aspect of external speech. It is a function in itself. It still remains speech, i.e., thought connected with words, but while in external speech, thought is embodied in words, in inner speech, words die as they bring forth thought. Inner speech is, to a large extent, thinking in pure meanings. Another key feature of this theory is the idea of an MKO, or more knowledgeable other. The more knowledgeable other, MKO, is somebody who has a better understanding or higher ability level for a certain skill than the learner. An MKO is typically a teacher or parent, but in many cases it is a peer. Sometimes the child themselves can be an MKO for an adult. The MKO does not have to be human. Many companies use electronic performance support systems to support employees in their learning process. Electronic tutors are used in educational settings to guide learning, like adaptive learning games used in classrooms on iPads. The idea is that the MKO must have more knowledge about the topic being learned than the learner. The zone of proximal development is the gap between what a child can do on their own and what they can do with assistance from an MKO. Therefore, it is integrally related to the MKO. Scaffolding is the technique used to work within the ZPD. During scaffolding, the support from an MKO is gradually decreased as the student becomes more skillful with the task. According to Vygotsky, a child left alone will develop, but not to their full potential. He argues that only through collaboration with adults or an MKO will the ZPD gap be bridged. For example, a child left alone with a jigsaw puzzle could eventually figure out how to put it together, or they may never figure it out. However, after being shown by an MKO how to complete the puzzle, the child can now complete the puzzle faster and with more accuracy, and can also apply this knowledge to other puzzles in the future. When working within the ZPD, the task being learned is just beyond the capabilities of the learner. The task must be challenging to promote maximum cognitive growth. The MKO provides hints, instructions, and encouragement. With this, the child is able to internalize the how to do it as part of their inner speech. This can be used later on similar tasks when the child is alone. Peers can also be MKOs, and cooperative learning exercises used in classrooms can give less competent children a chance to learn from more skillful peers. In today's classroom, you will see Vygotsky's research and theory in many things that we do. The modern classroom is less teacher-driven and more student-driven. The focus on individualized learning within the ZPD is strong today. Stress is placed upon the importance of teachers collaborating with students to create meaning from information, rather than the teacher dictating information for later regurgitation by the student. The teacher begins as the MKO, leading the discovery, meeting the students where they are, and accounting for background knowledge. As the learning progresses, the teacher's role is reduced over time until the learner is creating. Vygotsky notes that it is essential that the higher level partner be aware of the lower partner's lower level. If they are not, the one partner may dominate and the interaction will be less successful. In conclusion, Lev Vygotsky was a constructivist who stressed culture and social environment as an important influence on child development. Examples of his work still used in classrooms today are scaffolding and the zone of proximal development. His work continues to guide education, especially in the elementary education world.